Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Rowing Chat. Rowing Chat is the podcast network for the sport of rowing, and we hugely enjoy the opportunity to meet and interview some of the leading lights who are doing innovative things in the sport. When I first started Rowing Chat, it was 2013, so it was a while ago, and I've particularly always liked finding shiny new objects and people who are willing to share their expertise, knowledge, and insight into their little bit of the sport of rowing. And today is no exception. I'm joined by Adrian Cassidy, who is the CEO and founder of Ludum. Welcome, Adrian.
Good morning, Rebecca. How are you doing?
It's great to have you on the show again. Now, for people who are watching live, really great to have you. And if you want to make a comment or ask a question, please use the comments underneath the live video stream. And as I see your questions come in, I'll insert them into our conversation. But for now, just tell us where you are and where you're listening or watching from. Now, Adrian, you and I obviously have known each other for some time, but the listeners may not know you. So can you tell everybody a little bit about you and your background in the sport of rowing?
Hi, I guess I was introduced to rowing at school when I was 13, and it's basically, I guess it ended up being the sport that I enjoyed the most. And then as I got to the last couple of years at school, I rowed internationally, British Row, was a junior world champion my last year at school. And then I spent the next years of my life getting into the British team every now and then rowing at the University of London, which was the bulk of my rowing, really. And I was captain of UL. I rowed internationally for the British team a few times. And then after that, I got into coaching. I coached some talent ID, coached at Cambridge University first, and then I coached some talent ID program for British rowing. And then I was chief coach of the Irish rowing team through to the London Olympics in 2012. And then since then I've retired and now gone into doing executive coaching and running Ludum the last few years.
Wow, Ireland is a fascinating country, and I guess the work that you did really laid the foundations for what is the success that we're seeing now.
Well, I don't know about that. We did quite a lot of stuff. We changed quite a lot of stuff and centralized the program. And I coached Sunita, who's now obviously the single sculler still. But the team that's taken over since then has done a great job just growing the sport, making it a properly competitive sport. It's amazing what they've done.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. Now, of course, you're a software entrepreneur and you founded Ludum. Now, tell us, what is Ludum and what's it got to do with rowing?
Well, Ludum's an online platform which we developed because we know coaches are collecting a lot of information on spreadsheets and Google Docs, and they're communicating through WhatsApp and Facebook groups. And when I was coaching, it was always hard to maintain that data. So we created something where people can collect the data they're used to collecting, but they can also communicate and organize the clubs and send out the training program and all that kind of stuff. So everybody knows what's going on. And then also it enables them to collect better data like heart rate and GPS, which normally athletes would have on their watch and their own private account. But now coaches can actually see all of it in one place.
Give us some idea about the sort of size of teams that are actually using Ludum for their training.
It varies, really. It covers groups of maybe a junior group of 10 or 12 people in a club. It's not just the whole club has to use it. Or we have a big club like Vesta has maybe 130 people using it across the whole program. It helps them organize the women, the veterans, the masters, all different groups. And different coaches are organizing their own people within that. So we have a really diverse, and then we've got things like the German national team who use it across the juniors, under 23s and their elite program, as well as their national development centers. So it's really capable of covering a whole spectrum of user types. And some people use it just to organize, and some people use it to collect really high-end information.
And like all new things, this has probably taken 5+ years to develop. What's the journey?
For us, for me, you mean? Yeah, well, we started off as a bit of a hobby horse, really. 3 of us from the University of London for 3 different generations. We tried to provide something for the coaches at UL. And then slowly it became obvious that actually other people were interested. And then the first thing we had to do is rewrite the whole thing so people could use mobile phone apps, because it was clear that unless you had an app, athletes just weren't going to engage in it at all. So that took us about a year to do. And then in September last year, we launched Ludum properly, having basically been through a couple of iterations. Yeah, and it's been, I've got to say, every day is a school day. I've learned so much doing this. It's incredible.
Have you personally done software before?
Oh, I can't write a line of code myself at all. So it's been a complete eye-opener. How to run a business, how to employ coders, how to manage coders. And then the commercial side is also something that we've done a lot more recently, all the marketing and sales and stuff, especially doing stuff, SEO stuff online. It's just so much to do. It's amazing.
Yep. It's a rabbit hole.
Yeah, it is.
Now,
but it's been, I mean, I've loved every minute of it. And but I've loved every minute doing it, really. It's just completely different from coaching, but still keeps me involved with the rowing community. So still getting to speak to coaches and still getting to meet other people in the rowing community that I wouldn't have met, because normally they'd be your competition, but now they're coaches who you're not competing against them, and they're actually much more open. It's amazing. You have much more open conversations with them.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting not only what the similarities are, but also what the differences are?
It was something that Paul Thompson said to me, actually, when I went from British rowing to Irish rowing, saying different place, same problems. So everybody in rowing, everybody does loads of volume. They just train a lot. The differences in the program. People completely overestimate the value of them, I think. But people's challenges, their environments are all very different. They've all got different things that limit what they can achieve and what they have to work around. And that's always interesting to see how people how creative they are solving the limitations of their environment, really.
Give us an example.
I guess you go to some clubs where they can't get on the water a lot because of traffic or weather. And then sometimes they've got to, so William Perkins, so Windsor Boys School, the kids have to row for 10 minutes, carry the boat over a lock, row for 10 minutes, carry it over another lock, every single session. So the kids, they get used to that. They get very good at doing it. They do it very quickly. So when those kids go to university, hardly any of them go up, because it's not harder to row at university than it was where they were at school, despite having a professional coach. Whereas a lot of kids go to a really nice school in the UK, and then they go to university, it's all student run, and it's too difficult, and they just give up. So those are the differences that what teaches them is really, really interesting.
I've always felt that rowing is the one sport that gives you incredible life skills.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to try and row with people you don't always get on with, and you have to do a ridiculous amount of training at really unsociable times of day and weather. So yeah, you definitely learn a lot, I think.
Plus that time management. I was talking to Kath Bishop, and she has some very interesting insights in her long win philosophy about the life skills that you pick up about nutrition, about organizing yourself, not just your ability to move a boat on the water.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we found when we first started in Ireland. We had nobody from the 23 juniors or Olympics was left rowing in Ireland. We had to start from scratch. And when we centralized it, a lot of the kids didn't have the right behaviors, carrying a water bottle, turning up on time, warming up properly. And without having other athletes to learn from, we had to kind of tell them everything. And how you do that without nagging was the challenge, basically.
We had an example literally this weekend at the junior camp of one lad who was late for every session. And when you start explaining to him that here we are, and there's 9 people in the crew plus a coach, and you're late, and your 5 minutes late is multiplied by the number of people who you are also holding up. And, that comes up to 100 plus minutes over the course of one day with 3 training sessions a day. So what are you going to do about it, young man? And it's quite I suppose, coming head first, face to face with a reality that perhaps has never been presented to them like that before.
Yeah, and also I think, especially when you get young people turning up, the way they behave is a product of their upbringing and their environment in school. It's not necessarily the behaviors they require to be good at rowing. Now, whatever their maximum potential is, there are still behaviors that are correct on there. And I think that's the fundamental thing as a coach. The first thing you have to do is teach them the right behaviors, the things that are acceptable. And you only ever get the behaviors you tolerate. So if you let them get away with it, they'll just keep doing it. So you have to find a way without making them feel bad about who they are or being personal, attacking them. It's more you're sort of critiquing the behavior, not their personality.
Absolutely. And you set a framework for how we act around here, which is, the great place into which, of course, you can insert things like Ludum.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things we also learn is when people take on Ludum, it's a big cultural thing as well, because suddenly you're requiring people to record their data and to see the value of that. Whereas up to that point, the coaches feel like they have control of the data, they own it, and they're always writing it down, and the athletes can only see it sporadically. So it's a big cultural shift as well for people.
Ludum's become extremely well known online, particularly through the content marketing that you do. You did some very early podcast interviews, and you've recently got Martin Cross on board. Tell us a bit about the work that Martin, Crossy's Corner, is developing.
Oh, it's been amazing watching Martin. I've known Martin for a long time, rode with him and stuff. And he did the Sinkovic Brothers interview on his own. He organized all that. That was the very first one. And I got in touch with him and I said, why don't we needed some content marketing that was not just about our product, but just something that people found interesting and valuable to the community. And we all know how Martin is so well regarded in the community, and he's so good at talking to people and making people feel at ease. So we just slowly started doing a few more episodes, and we have a meeting every few weeks. And we just discuss people we think might be interesting, and he pops up with people he finds. I find a few people for him. And it's just grown and grown. And it's just really nice to see all the fabulous comments that Martin gets and what he gets out of people. I thought particularly interesting was Christian Falco, who's just about to go to Germany from the British team. Some of the stuff that Martin got Christian to talk about, people have been really excited about it, actually, which is great to see. And it's good for Martin because it's something he loves doing. It's given him a really nice platform to do it.
I'll find the link, listeners, to that Christian Falco interview, and I'll put it into the show notes. So if you want to spend some time reliving that experience, you can. Now, I know that Ludum has done several conferences over the past few years. The current one you're calling R5. Does this mean that I've missed 4 conferences, Adrian?
Yeah, this is our 5th year. We started it 5 years ago. And the reason why we did it is because when we were trying to get people to use our platform, when it was a very basic stage, we suddenly realized that there was no education in any country or in Vesta about data. And so we thought we'd put on a conference that was nothing to do with our product. It was just purely to do with educational stuff and information from other sports, and also a conference that's not got sort of national governing body perspective, that it's got a particular agenda it's trying to do. We just provide content. People come for a day, they listen to as much as they can, go home, usually with more questions than answers. And it's been really fun, actually, really fun doing it. And people seem to have enjoyed it. And this year, because it's online, we knew we couldn't do a normal conference. And we just felt, I'm not a bit about doing quite a lot of stuff, a bit like the FISA model, doing a few days of content. But we just thought people have had enough Zooming this year that So we just do one interview. And I managed to get hold of Jurgen and speak to him. And because coincidentally he'd retired from British Rowing in August, and up to that point he wouldn't talk about what he does, because obviously that's what he did for a living and that was his competition. But so he seems very excited, actually. Him and Martin are going to chat next weekend on Sunday, on the 24th, about an hour and a half. I think it's going to be a really fun interview. Jurgen seems to be in great form, actually, so I think it'll be really good.
Tell the listeners where they can sign up, because this is a virtual event, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's going to be, if you go to rowersconference.com and just sign up, it's completely free. We'll send you an email with a link to the conference when it comes on 3 o'clock UK time, Sunday the 24th. It'll be about an hour and a half, I think, so people can get a glass of wine or whatever and sit down and listen to it.
And it's being recorded, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. We've had a lot of people sign up from Australia and New Zealand. It'll be recorded, and so when they wake up, it will be online for them to watch, and they can see the whole thing. Yep. But again, it's going to be private for the people who sign up. It's not going to be a public thing. We may release it a few months later in little bite-sized chunks. The whole interview will be for those that sign up.
Fantastic. So a reminder for everybody, it's rowersconference.com. And again, I will put the link in the show notes. And please take the opportunity to share that around your rowing friends, because there's nothing like listening to an experienced coach when they're ready and willing to talk, because you get such nuggets of insight that you can actually use yourself. You might think, you know, he's coached Olympic medalists and I'm coaching my local club. Trust me, as Adrian said earlier, same situation, different problems. You will find stuff that is invaluable.
Yeah, and the thing about Jurgen is that although he writes an amazing program and the guys do train ridiculously hard, that his strength is the way he communicates with the athletes. He makes them confident. You ask them, how come did you think you were going to win? They said, I believed I was going to win. And until they'd been coached by Jurgen, they never felt like that. So there's something he does just in his communication and the way he manages everybody that makes them so good. So it'd be fascinating to see what he says about that.
Am I right? He's the only coach to have won a gold medal at 6 Olympic Games in rowing?
Yes, I think so. We're talking to him 24, since he came to the UK, 24 gold medals, 6 silvers, 8 Olympic gold medals. And there's only 1 year at the World Championships where he didn't win a medal.
Wow. That's a record.
Yeah, he's got to possibly be the most prolific sports coach, not just rowing coach ever.
That is quite something. Well, I personally will definitely I am already signed up. Adrian knows this, but I definitely won't be watching live, because 3 o'clock in the UK is 4 a.m. And even for me, that's quite an early start.
Too early, yeah.
Now, I've been with you privately on the Ludum journey for a little while now, and I've had some wonderful insights into the sort of features and functionality that you offer inside the software. You mentioned earlier rewriting Ludum as an app and the ability to pick up live GPS and heart rate data. Tell us about this new functionality. You're calling it Ludum Live. What does it do?
It basically enables the coach, to see everybody's training data live at the same time. So the athletes can use their phones to collect the GPS and their speed and stuff like that. And then they can connect heart rate monitors to that, so that you can get live heart rate monitor data and speed data. So then the coach, when he logs into the website, he can see a little tile for every single athlete and their speed. If they're connected to the ergo or the ski ergo or the bike ergo, they can also get all that data live. So in effect, you can have 20, 30 people live on the site, and the coach can watch live what they're doing, and the athletes can, they have a second screen next to the ergo, so they can see what everybody else is doing. So trying to get a bit of community. It was driven a little bit around the COVID thing, because obviously it's very difficult for people to sustain not training together. This means it's a bit more transparent in the group, so everybody can see what each other's doing on a given session.
Now, Adrian's given us a a video that we can watch that explains what Ludum Live actually does.
As many of you know, the Ludum app now records training within the app. You simply open up the training session you've been prescribed. Bottom right hand corner, there's a button. Press that, and all the data will be saved in Ludum for you to track. The advantage of this means you do not need to buy an expensive device like a watch or cycling computer. You simply connect your heart rate device to the app and then do your training. One of the added benefits of connecting to the app is our new feature, Ludum Live. And in Ludum Live, when all the athletes connect to the same training session and record their data, you will instantly see all the athletes who are currently training in this live session. And you get a tile view to start off with. And within that, you'll have their time, their distance, their speed, their pace, heart rate, all that kind of stuff will be in the tile. And you can look at that as a tile, or if you want to, you can change it to do a table view. And that means you can sort it by different fields, whichever one you're interested in. Plus, you can decide which athletes you want to see. So if there's 30 or 40 athletes, simply pick the ones you're interested in. Also, if they're out and about, use a map. If you press the open map button up there, you get a pop-up map box. If you want to, you can make the map full screen. So you as the viewer have complete control over what you want to see. So whether it's an indoor rowing session where everybody's connected to the rowing machine and you can see all the splits and heart rate up on a projected screen, or whether it's people who are going out rowing and the coach can see who's where on the river and what rates they're doing and how fast they're going, what heart rates the athletes have got. Or if you wanted to organize a run around Richmond Park and you've got 30 athletes running around, all those scenarios are possible simply by connecting through the Ludum app, and it will be streamed live onto the website. So Ludum Live is in Ludum right now. Simply open a training session and look for the live tab, and there you'll see all the data from all the athletes who are connected to the session at the time. Please go and have a try and hope you enjoy it.
That looks amazing, Adrian. That is...
Yeah, the guys did an amazing job.
Wow.
Yeah, the guys did a great job just before Christmas actually getting that finished. It was, yeah, very cool. The designer, just an interesting process. We had a few ideas and just giving it to the designers to come up with. And I think we're quite close to be able to do two-way communication with it. So the coaches will be able to send individual messages to the athletes within their apps whilst they're training. So to say to them, back off your speed, or if they're out rowing, telling the crew that's right at the front who can't hear you on the megaphone to turn around. So yeah, and it might be a safety benefit for some people as well, because they can see where everybody is on the river. So yeah, that should come out in the next month or two. So yeah, it's been great.
Is an incredible pipeline of features, and can I just say personally, congratulations.
Thank you. It's amazing actually, and we've had great feedback from our current users. They've been using it, testing it for us over Christmas, and I think they found it really helpful with all the kids being training remotely. It makes it easier for them to motivate the kids to train, because it gets them it feels like they're all in the same room training together. So yeah, it's great. It's really good. It's really good.
Isn't it interesting? It's one of these bits of functionality that actually the lockdowns has really accelerated our uptake of leading edge technology.
It really has. I mean, for me, in lockdown, I haven't been training very much for 15, 20 years. And then I started training last January a bit. And then friends of mine, there's the Molesey group, like the Crossy's part of, or the leg ends, they call them, in Molesey. And one of my friends said, I can join in. Actually, there's like an ergo 4 days a week. And people come to one or two, or some people do all of them. And, it's all, everybody does the same work. You log in, everybody has a chat and a bit of a joke and pulling each other's leg a bit. And then everybody does the work. And then afterwards, particularly on the weekends, we maybe stay on for an extra half an hour, have a coffee and chat. Actually, it's been really good for keeping people motivated through. And it doesn't matter. I mean, you can't see anybody's scores, but then 5 minutes later, the WhatsApp group just lights up with screenshots, and you can see everybody's showing off what they've done. But it's amazing actually, because the group is much more than that. It's actually, one of the guys had a bit of a heart problem during lockdown, and suddenly there was like 4 people giving phone numbers for doctors and people putting in journal articles. So it just also creates a massively supportive environment for the guys who are doing it, really. So it's been really good to reconnect with people at a distance.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it too. I know I'm a bit of a geek, but it's been a great eye opener about what's possible and how flexible actually rowing as a sport is.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting because I've got 3 daughters who row, 2 of them in the US and 1 in the UK. And the 2 girls from the US came back when the lockdown came in March last year. And it's been an eye-opener because of the NCAA rules. The coaches weren't allowed to support them, so they couldn't give them a training program. They could give them guidance, but the coaches worked really hard at doing Zoom meetings and Zoom quizzes and everything. But actually, the girls struggled to carry on training because there was just no environment, no support. You know, the coaches weren't allowed to do that. Whereas in the UK, my daughter was in London, UL, they trained all the way through. They had 2 sessions a day, and it was hard for sure. And now my daughters have stayed in the UK for a year because they deferred, and they're rowing at clubs in London. And actually, this lockdown, they're training properly because the coaches are giving them a program. You know, they're doing Zoom works together. You know, there's loads of stuff going on, and they've been supported really well. And I think the coaches, from what I could tell, you know, we did an interview with coaches about coaching during lockdown for the previous lockdown, and it's amazing the creativity the coaches have come up with to manage their groups and keep them motivated. And from the ones I've spoken to, of course they want the athletes to improve because they're hoping to be able to race, but they're just hoping people won't give up by the end of this. They want people to stay engaged with the sport beyond these periods of lockdown.
Yeah, and I think it'll give us some clues about how the sport can and should adapt in the future. Because one of the limitations of rowing is you have to live near a rowing club and a body of water that is capable of, you know, enabling you. Nowadays, maybe there's the opportunity to join a club and be a remote, you know, user. There's one lady I know in the US, she does what they call it car topping. She puts her single on top of the car and she goes to a park and puts it on a lake in the middle of a public park.
Amazing. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
No, she parks the baby. She's a 2-year-old. So she parks the baby with her mum first and then off she goes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's very creative, isn't it?
Now we've got some live watchers. Our first comment is from someone who says, it looks like a great tool. My hubby is having a good look at it as I type. Well, thank you. And we look forward to hopefully getting a demo there. And another listener says, this is an excellent interview. Awesome coaching app, especially in this stressful time for juniors.
Well,
and another one saying the rowers conference looks interesting too. I'll spread the word. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it'll be a great interview, definitely.
Now, I want to move on, Adrian, to talk a little bit about data. So I have been collecting data for my own personal training for many years. I've owned many different bits of rowing electronics over the years. I now have apps as well. Let's talk about why are people frightened or, let's say, not confident about data when it comes to their rowing practice?
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because you go back to the beginning of time, people have always recorded data. They've had a stopwatch and they've written stuff down in a notebook. And people think data always has to be numbers. You know, a video is a bit of data. It's purely information about what you've just done. And I think currently, one of the things in rowing coaching is that there is no formal education around data. None of the national governing bodies that I've looked at or World Rowing, is there any a module about collecting, managing, and interpreting data? So coaches, by and large, unless they've had some sort of education like that within a degree or something they've done before, they're not really been educated or prepared for this. And the amount of data that's coming in is just growing and growing and growing. And people spend a lot of time just typing into spreadsheets. And you spend all that time typing it in, and then you have to get on for the next thing, and you don't have time to use. I mean, a prime example for me is you go out rowing, you've got 10 crews doing some pieces, you got coaches at the other end taking what times, you all come back together, you sit down with a cup of coffee in between sessions, typing all the numbers in to get the results ready. As soon as they're ready, the athletes have had breakfast and they're ready for the second session, and you maybe talk to them a bit in the boat bay on the way out, but really you've missed that opportunity to give real feedback. So you can see why athletes, coaches don't want more data in that respect. So we've come from the other side saying, well, let's try and automate that as much as possible, so you don't spend your time putting it in, you spend your time dealing with it and looking at it and using it to improve what people are doing.
So there is a tendency for people to collect the data that's easy, but not the data that's important. So how can we make a judgment about which is the sort of data that's going to be most useful?
Again, it depends on your program what's useful, doesn't it? Because it depends what level you're performing at. If you're at a very young level where the kids are just starting, just teaching them to turn up, that it's important to turn up every day is important, and managing a roster. So you can say to somebody who, say, little Johnny doesn't make the crew and parents come and complain, you can open up and go, look, you only turn up to 70% of the sessions. Of course you didn't make the crew. So at a very big level, that's data, and that's a useful thing for people to do. But at the very high level, you know, I think the important thing for people to understand is that you write a training program, and if somebody says to you, oh, you won this year, you've done really well, what training did you do? The coach would invariably say, well, here's my training program. Well, they won't because they didn't share it, but that's what they did. But actually, it's really not what they did, because every single athlete within the team will have done a completely different program to that. You know, some guys were ill or injured, they missed sessions. Some will have done more training. Even if you go out in a crew together and do, let's say, the 20K row, some people have pulled too hard and some people will have pulled hard enough. So even if within one session, they will have done a different session. And that difference accumulates over the season. And coaches just have no insight as to what's happening. They don't know that's different. They assume that it's different, and they manage the athletes like them when they're too tired or whatever. No insight to, why there's suddenly one athlete's not improving. They don't really know what training they've done or what the load has been on them. And I think by having, and a lot of athletes are already wearing heart rate monitors, so that data has already been collected, but it's in their own Polar or Garmin account, and the coach can't see it. So all we've done is we've made it possible for all those athletes to collect the data with whatever device they want, and we pull it in the middle, and then the coach can see everybody's data on a session or over time. And it takes the coaches no effort to do that because that's all done automatically.
Yeah, so then the job of work becomes data interpretation rather than data collection.
Correct. And then also the first thing people say to us is, what does this mean? Because they haven't seen it before. And there's been no real insight. And hence the Rose Conference a little bit to try and give people some insight. But also, we also work with people. We don't just, sell the platform and give it to them. We are there to support people as well, to help them understand how to interpret it, some ideas of, because invariably what happens when you collect more data is it doesn't give you any answers. It just gives you new questions. And hopefully those new questions lead you to somewhere more productive. And one thing I think sometimes coaches are a bit afraid of is that it also means the athletes will have more questions. And sometimes it means you as a coach don't have the answer. And you need to be confident to say to the athlete, look, I don't know, let me go and read up, or let me go and speak to somebody, or let's try this and see what difference it makes.
Yeah, the coach is not God yet.
No, and I think also people think by having all this data, it undermines them, it takes the coaching away. I completely disagree. I think it just empowers the coach even more, because you're just giving better insight, and you're empowering the athlete. And fundamentally, I think this is what people might learn a lot from when they hear Jurgen is that what he does is he makes them take control. And I think a real insight that is Matthew Pinson in his book. The first time he's going to the Olympic Games, he's 20 years old. He's in a pair with Steve Redgrave, and they've been winning all these races. And they come to the Olympics, and he's waiting for this golden nugget from Jurgen to say, how he's going to win this gold medal. And they have the pre-race chat, and they take the blades down, and they get in the boat. And as Jurgen just pushes them off, he just says to them, "Good luck, guys. Have a really good row." And then Matthew goes, "Oh, it's down to me." And it was like a moment for him to realize, and Jurgen basically created a position where he was confident enough that he could then go off and execute it without Jurgen in the boat.
That transfer of responsibility and knowing that as a teacher, as a coach, you have enabled an enormous amount of knowledge and confidence to go from you over to the athlete. But then at the end of the day, the athlete does have to take control, don't they?
Yeah, 100%. And that's why the whole thing's about behaviors. There are certain behaviors that people have that make them successful. And you can use the data to reflect back what the athlete's doing, and it reinforces your point of view, perhaps. And it makes it, for some athletes, it's a really powerful tool to make them realize, okay, I want to change what I'm doing, so I need to change how I do it or what I do, which is like turning up on time, eating properly, behaving properly around the people I'm with, not just being destructive personality or whatever. All these behavior changes, and you as a coach, you're trying to get their behavior from A to B. And then if you get into point B, you can just push them off and they can go win the race on their own. They know how to do it. And then you're powerless on the bank waiting to see the result.
You're as nervous as their mum.
Oh, totally. Yeah, you got nothing to do. You can't do anything about it.
Yeah. Now, it's quite clear that a lot is going to be changing in a lot of parts of sport over the next few years. I'd love you to tell us a little bit about where you think rowing as a whole sport might be changing and what we might be able to expect.
It's going to be fascinating. People, with all this remote training, I think coaches have learned that actually they can trust the athletes more than they thought. That it's amazing how well the athletes will get on with it. Other sports, people train independently, and they are very motivated and very often take control and employ their own coaches, and they are self-driven. Whereas in rowing, we have a real sort of, it's a massively team sport, isn't it? And it's all coach-driven. So athletes very much, when they come to the boathouse, they hand themselves over to the coach. I remember a conversation I had with Andy Hodge in the run-up to the Rio cycle. He got glandular fever, and suddenly he was not part of the team. He wasn't sure whether he'd make it back or not, and he was doing all his recovery stuff on his own back at home. So he took control of his training. He managed it. He spoke to the right people. He would feed back to Jurgen regularly what he was doing as he was getting better and better. And then suddenly he realized, oh, maybe I can make a comeback. And he took complete control over that process. And then when he went, and he said he had records of what he did and everything. And then when he went back to Caversham to join the group, he just handed himself over and just did what he was told again, and didn't take control of it in that way. No, okay, and he won a gold medal in Rio, so it wasn't the wrong thing to do. But there's something in our sport about handing yourself over to the system. And in terms of building a culture, people always feel if you have a group of people training together, you need to all do the same thing because it gives everybody confidence that you're all doing the training. I think what we found in this lockdown is that people will have done more individualized training because they've been on their own and taken a bit of responsibility. Maybe improved. Some of them will have improved better, some worse. And I think it's going to be interesting when we come back together, because we will come back together. People want to be together. Nobody wants to do this. We're pack animals. We like socializing. We like being with other people. Everybody will be desperate to get back and cruise together. I wonder how coaches will manage their programs differently now. And maybe they won't do 80-hour weeks all the time. Maybe they'll let the athletes come down and train on their own and go home, instead of feeling they have to be there for every single session.
Certainly, Rebecca Romero talked about that when she left rowing and went to cycling. She certainly made a lot of the fact that her cycling coaches allowed her to train at a time that suited her. She loathed early mornings, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, she did. They'd go away on training camps, just the athletes, and they would communicate remotely with the coach and give them feedback over the phone. And in cycling, a lot of people have a coach they've never met. They just deal with them online, and there's a bit of growth in that. We've got one guy, Josh Butler, who's the coach at Westminster, but he's got his own system row coach that he's doing. And he's basically got online clients. I mean, they're using Ludum, but they've got online clients so they can collect the data remotely wherever they are, and he gives them coaching online. I think that's going to happen, and athletes might start picking their coaches more than just having to take the coach given to them at their club. I think that would be fascinating.
Which, of course, makes it incumbent on the coach to have a good record of what they have achieved, not just race results.
Yeah, exactly. I always wondered what it would be like in a system where, with the funding, instead of the national team funding coaches centrally, if the national team gave all the athletes more money and said you have to pay for your own coaching, I wonder who would pay for which coaches, and whether some coaches would be oversubscribed and some would get very few customers.
I do worry when it becomes a popularity contest, because everyone knows that not everyone's personality perfectly aligns. But I do know of people who've gone through, national systems and big clubs, and many of them talk about the moment when the top, or their perception of who the top coach was, when they got noticed.
Yeah. I mean, that's very true, isn't it? And I think that this is also one of the things that I think is going to change a lot in our sport. Is there's a big thing at the moment, isn't there, about the well-being of athletes and what is bullying in rowing or in sports coaching and stuff like that. And for sure it goes on. Some coaches have done that to athletes and taken advantage of them and not treated them very well. But also, particularly in the high performance environment, it's pretty exceptional what you need to do, and unreasonable to a certain extent. So sometimes the coaches have to make you do some pretty unreasonable stuff, and it's not pleasant to be in a high performance environment, being told most days what you're doing is not good enough and you need to do it better. It's just relentless. But to win an Olympic gold medal, you have to do something pretty extraordinary. But I think the problem comes in the contracting beforehand, is that the athletes need to be made more aware of what is going to be expected of them and what the environment they're letting themselves in for, because fundamentally it is their choice to be there. It is their choice. I know it's not easy to walk away when it's your dream and suddenly you're in this environment and the coach is not what you want or doesn't work for you. But you just have to they have to explain it to the athletes what's going to be expected. Now, if you're at school, at university, I think it's a completely different thing. You're a young athlete, you're developing, it's all part of your education. It's about building your confidence and your skills. So I think the coaches there, performance isn't everything. It needs to be about treating the athletes properly and giving them the right development tools.
There's a comment here from a listener who says that American programs are prescriptive and have been for years. Now, you've got daughters studying and rowing in America and studying and rowing over here. Can you see a difference between the different approaches?
A little bit. I think there are programs which are trying to be competitive. They're NCAA Division I schools, so they are prescriptive, competitive programs, which would be the same with the Oxford Brookses and the ULs and stuff. In the UK, they're also that kind of program. They're bigger programs. They have more kids because they're funded. I think there's a dynamic because some of the kids are funded, and so that means that it's their expectation to perform is maybe the pressure's quite high. But I think the American coaches, the ones I've met anyway, they do a fantastic job. The girls train really hard. It's an amazing environment to have 40, 50 women just erging together and just being really openly competitive and just having music's up loud. They're just singing when they go in the minibus, all that stuff. They have a great time. And it is hard balancing academics and doing that. But I think the coaches, the two I've met particularly, they actually do care about the girls. It's not just about the results. They do look after the athletes mostly.
Now, you've mentioned several times how Ludum takes content marketing seriously and how you have chosen to invest in research and interviews and sharing articles. Do you also share expertise and how-tos on other aspects of the sport of rowing? What would someone find if they went to your website?
Yeah, we do. I mean, part of it's because the content drives people to our website, so it's because that's what we want to sell the product and make people aware of it. But also, we look online and see what are the topics that people are looking for, what are the things they're finding difficult, what are they searching for, and then we generate content to answer those questions. And we have physiologists from the Australian rowing team, Tony Rice. We've worked with him because the Australian team use our system, and we've worked with him for a few years. So he's done some videos about setting training zones and how to do monitoring and testing and stuff like that. And then we've had people like Robin Williams for articles about his coaching styles and those sort of things. And we try and get, Mark Homer was a physiologist for the British team. He's written stuff about monitoring athletes. So there's a whole general sort of topics that we cover. Some of them are about our features, and then also, Martin's interviews. So on Crossy's Corner, it's a broad spectrum. We've got athletes involved in who've been interviewed. We've had coaches that have been interviewed, and then we did a round table with a whole lot of coaches. It was a club coach, a university coach in the US, and Roger Barrett from South Africa, all together on one sort of round table talking about how they were managing their athletes during COVID. So it's quite a broad, different stuff. So there's a bit of content for everybody, and we do coaching, athlete monitoring, lots of different topics.
It's fascinating, and I absolutely endorse what you're doing, because it was exactly the same insight that led me to start the Row Perfect blog back in the day, which, people find this stuff because people are searching for it. Yeah,
exactly. And also, I mean, it takes a lot of work and time for us to do it, and it's not, and we're not, and it's, obviously the goal is to make people aware of Ludum, so people start signing up and finding us. But actually, there's no point in just doing something salesy about what we do in our features. That's just really dull. Nobody cares about that. So we want to have stuff that actually gives people value and maybe makes them think about some stuff. And we're very happy. We get messages from people about blogs, or we get just requests, not just about our product, but just asking questions. And do you have any more information about certain things? And we're really, in the ethos of our conference, we're really keen just to work and talk to people. And we've had people get in touch with us. A guy called Joe DeLeo, who's a weightlifting coach, and he's building his own business. And he got in touch with us, and he did a blog for us, and and he's working with us to help us develop some of our strength and conditioning stuff. So, it opens up all sorts of opportunities and relationships.
Adrian, tell people where they can connect with you and where they can find out more about Ludum.
The easiest place is to go to the Ludum website, and then there's an email address. You can send it to Adrian. I am on social media, but not the best engaged social media, but I will get my notifications. Whatever, and you've got my links. I guess after the call, people can get in touch. I'm on LinkedIn as well. I use that more than anything else, really, I guess. And I think more and more coaches are going to be on LinkedIn as a, one, looking for jobs, but two, just engaging with stuff, because there's some quite good stuff on there as well.
Yeah, there are a lot of coaches I follow and connect with on LinkedIn. That's definitely true. Adrian, thank you for your time. It's been a brilliant chat with you. I very much look forward to hanging out with you and listening to the Jurgen Grobler interview. All the links will be in the show notes. And that's been our rowing chat. I'm
Brilliant, Rebecca. Thanks very much. Good to see you again. It's been a while.
And till next time, goodbye.